Welcome to this week's episode. I'm Paula Williams.
I'm John Williams.
And we are ABCI, and ABCI's mission is
to help all you folks in the aviation world sell more of your products and services.
Absolutely. So the idea for this podcast came to me when we were driving across Europe in a very nice new BMW rental car.
Mm-hmm.
And John had the slogan from an ad pop out of his mouth, and he is not inclined to quote slogans from ads. John's not really the demographic of people who is easily swayed, right, by a catchy tagline, but it happened, right?
It did.
Cool. So we rented this car in Frankfurt. We were going to rent a convertible, but
they didn't have one, although they promised it to me, and the company being the kind of company they are, they said, okay, we're going to upgrade you. We're going to give you a sports car, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
I said, well, is it big enough to fit a couple of roll-on backs?
Right.
And it was.
Mm-hmm. As we were doing the grown-up version of backpacking across Europe, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay, so this was a lot of fun. We actually did a road trip from Frankfurt to Rome, and in this fabulous little rented BMW, right?
Yep.
And you said...
Well, after, what was it, the first or second day, I said, no wonder they call this the ultimate driving machine.
Exactly. And I'm like, who are you and what have you done with my husband?
Well, I mean, I'd heard that for years growing up, and I didn't, I never thought I'd ever drive a BMW, so
Mm-hmm.
when I lived in Europe, I still didn't drive a BMW, and but I had driven a Mercedes. I bought a used one over there.
Mm-hmm.
But when we got on the road, and I was able to figure out
How to work all the bells and whistles, right?
right, and realized it was all automatic.
Mm-hmm.
I just needed to shut off what I didn't want to use. And I said, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Because this car has probably 95% of all the stuff in it that all the electric cars are supposed to be touting
Mm-hmm.
with respect to automation. It doesn't have full self-driving, but it does keep you in your lane if you don't turn it off.
The driver assist.
Yeah, I mean, you get too close to the edge, it puts you back in the middle. You get too close to the center line, it puts you back in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Way cool.
Yeah, so there actually is a point to why we're talking about cars, even though this is an aviation podcast. But in the aviation industry, our numbers are so small that it's hard to find great examples and to know what was truly effective in terms of advertising. So we look at other industries where they're selling like hundreds of thousands of models of a particular car,
Exactly.
versus in aviation where they sell maybe 100 models of an airplane, right?
Yeah.
So it can be really, really helpful to look at industries where they have the numbers and it's still transportation, right?
And see how and what happens when they do what they do.
Exactly. So whatever
From
your
a marketing perspective.
right, exactly. And the pros and cons of a tagline are that it is a challenge, right?
Oh,
You're laying it on the line, and everybody who ever drives a BMW is going to ask him or herself, were they telling the truth with this tagline, right? And in your case,
Absolutely.
all right. So be careful with taglines and make sure it's a promise you can keep, right?
I mean, because I could extol its virtues for a while, but let's just say it's an interesting and likable car to drive.
Okay. So that's our example number one for the day is BMW, the ultimate driving machine, right?
Right?
Okay. Another one, Mercedes-Benz, engineered like no other car in the world.
And I can vouch for that. I have actually been able to tour the Mercedes factory in Singlefingen, Germany, and I didn't take the tour that you get when you buy a new car. We actually walked over the catwalks down amongst all the robots.
And this was with your MBA group, and they had some connections and other cool things. So,
and I could go on about that car as well. if I could ever afford one easily, that's probably what I would get.
Mhm.
Guaranteed never to, rust isn't the term they use, corrode
Yeah.
metal. And they can still have the forms to make any part for even the first car they made.
Mm-hmm.
And so we toured the whole factory from the stamping all the way through to they disassemble every third car completely and using micrometers measure every piece, fit, quality, and even the depth of the paint.
Wow. And you told me that every single car that went through that line in that factory was already purchased.
Yeah, it was already paid for before they built it.
Right. So, yeah, the engineering is clearly what makes it stand apart from...
Yeah, and unlike Ford, who did 100 of every car and then changed, every car that goes through the line there is different. Mm-hmm. And you watch the robots figure it out and put it together, and it's just crazy.
That is cool. Okay, Rolls-Royce is another example. If you've ever taken a marketing course of any kind from anybody, they are going to mention David Ogilvy's famous line, at 60 miles an hour, the loudest noise in this new Rolls-Royce comes from the electric clock. So David Ogilvy being the king of copywriting, and I think there was a book, The King of Madison Avenue, that was all about David Ogilvy, and that was probably his crowning achievement was the Rolls-Royce contract.
And for those of you that are relatively new to the world, electric clocks in cars used to click.
Used to tick. Exactly. So it's just a really iconic line that they still use in marketing classes because it was such a departure from every other car in the world which was noisy, and the Rolls-Royce has such a insulated cabin and such a luxurious experience for passengers. So it's kind of like the opposite of BMW, where it's the ultimate driving machine. They're appealing to drivers. Rolls-Royce is appealing to passengers. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Audi is another great one. Advancement through technology. They've been using that one since the 1980s. I've got a really good friend who has an Audi that is just enamored of her Audi 4, I think, and drives it every day and, wouldn't trade it for anything. In fact, she does trade it for things. She trades it for another Audi, a new Audi every couple of years. But, she's clearly the target market for this Audi, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Porsche, there is no substitute.
Having driven several and worked on a lot of them growing up, I'd have to agree.
Mm-hmm. There was a movie recently, Ford versus Porsche?
Nope.
No.
It was Ford versus something else, but I don't think it was Porsche.
Okay, never mind. We'll cut that part. But, Porsche is clearly very Italian. And very snobby. Oh, it was Ford versus Ferrari was the movie. Okay, yeah. Anyway, Porsche is in that category of performance cars, race cars and so on. There is no substitute. That's pretty good.
Yeah, I had a part-time job growing up where I tuned up
Porsches?
Porsches among many others. They were offshore made cars. Mm-hmm. And it was all the Maseratis, the Lamborghinis, everything else. I did tune-ups for them. And because I did tune-ups, I had to go drive them to test it out.
Dang. That's terrible.
Exactly.
How did you manage?
And since I was living in San Francisco at the time, 101 made an excellent test.
Okay. So were they telling the truth? There is no substitute.
Well, back then, absolutely. I don't know. I might consider a Ferrari nowadays.
Okay, that's cool. And last tagline we're going to mention is a very different one, and that is from the 2000s. This is Subaru. Love is what makes a Subaru a Subaru. So what's different about this is, number one, they have a very different demographic. This is a car for families, for dog owners, clearly for people who love the outdoors and things like that. It's not a high performance vehicle. It is a dependable vehicle. And the tagline is about the customer, not about the car.
Right.
So I think, if there has been a shift over the last few years in terms of advertising, it has been to make the advertising about the customer and what does the product do for the customer, not about what does the product do in a vacuum,
Exactly.
So, there's a lot that we can learn from the aviation, there's a lot that the aviation industry can learn from the automotive industry. And taglines is one of the best.
At least with respect to marketing.
With respect to marketing. Taglines being one of the best test cases, I think, of, things that can be very, very powerful and things that we can learn from people who do it right and people who do it wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Ciao.